Welcome to this edition of Morgan Asked For podcast, Wednesday, March 13th, about 9:30. Watching the Cincinnati-Kansas game right now. Cincinnati's ahead of Kansas right now. We're going to discuss all college basketball, in-depth, men's, women's, high major, low major, all college basketball in this episode. We did release an extra episode this week where we talk about the NFL free agency. So tune into your favorite podcast feed where there will be an extra episode of Morgan Asked For this week. And again, we want to thank Steve Shetler and Dan Bryce at DB Landscaping for allowing us and sponsoring us to get on Steve Shetler media page. Tune into his YouTube page where you can watch us. The video feed was up last week, so our ugly mugs are up on there if you would like to see what we look like if you don't know. But yeah, so Steve Shetler Media, his YouTube page is up on there each week. Thursday about 7:00, I think, is when it goes up there. So let's go ahead and start. We're going to go kind of in this order. We're going to start with the women. We're going to start with the Iowa women, then we're going to go to the Iowa State women, where they both played for championships, one won, one lost. And then the Iowa men had a chance to get firmly on the bubble. They missed that chance. Then Iowa State lost a game where it might not really affect them at all, depending on how this week goes. But the only thing it would do would be affect the seed line there. So let's go ahead and let's start with the Iowa women. A couple notes here. 3 straight Big Ten tourney titles. Caitlin Clark set even more records, all kinds of records. They are going to be a number 1 seed in the tourney now. Probably the number 2 overall seed, I would guess. They want them away from South Carolina as long as they can. They would love to see Iowa versus South Carolina in that championship game. If you're the NCAA and I'm assuming that game's on ESPN. And Iowa's going to get a huge favorable draw, I believe, because TV wants Caitlin Clark in that tournament as long as you can. And you cannot blame the networks for wanting that. I don't know what seed LSU is going to be, but I think they're a 2, maybe 3 seed. So I would expect them to be in the same region as Iowa. So they play in that Elite 8 game to get to the Final Four. And then South Carolina in that championship game, if Iowa can get that far.
Let's talk about that real quick before we get into the Big Ten championship and all that. I think what the TV deals want, what the committee wants, the latest bracket that I saw actually had LSU as a 2 seed in the bracket below. When I look at brackets, I do top left, top right, bottom left. That's just how I do it. I've always done it that way.
They would match up LSU and Iowa if they both get to the Final Four.
The Final Four, if that bracketology is correct. I think what the TV networks want, though, ideally for the ratings, they want South Carolina versus USC with Juju Watkins in the Final Four. And then they want Iowa versus LSU, the rematch. Those would get the highest ratings. And that way, the Final Four is going to have a big number. And then no matter what championship match, if you get up South Carolina versus Iowa, it's the best team versus Clark. If you get South Carolina versus LSU, you get the drama of what happened the other night, which we'll get into a little bit. I know we didn't have it written down, but we should. If it's USC versus Iowa, you get Caitlin Clark's last game ever and sort of the passing of the torch to Juju Watkins.
Yep.
So I think that's the Final Four they want. We'll see if that happens. But for ratings, that would be the ideal Final Four. You got Stanford out there, Notre Dame, UConn, Virginia Tech, Ohio State, Indiana, Texas. And those will draw some good numbers too, but those are the big 4 that they want.
Absolutely. All right, so let's get back to the actual tournament and really just that championship game. First 2 games are blowouts. Upsets happened on the top of the bracket where Ohio State did not get out of their first quarterfinal game. Maryland beats them. Maryland's a good team, not a great team, but Maryland's got a national championship. They've got experience. They're a good basketball program. So not completely surprising in that situation. And then Nebraska goes and beats Maryland, Nebraska, and Iowa in the championship game. Nebraska a couple weeks ago Big comeback for the win, where the question was Caitlin Clark not break the record at Nebraska. They wanted to do it at home. And Nebraska looked like they were going to win the basketball game for the majority of the game. Caitlin Clark went 0 for 9 from 3-point range, 4 points at halftime. Now, they were still in it, but they were down about 10 points. I don't remember exactly what it was, but about 10 points or so. Caitlin Clark played much better in the second half, and let's get closer. About 2 minutes left. I think it was 2:15. They were down 8. That ESPN predictor, they have that was like 99% chance for Nebraska. And Caitlin Clark wills her way and her team's way. They hit a couple shots. Kate Martin played dynamite. I think Sydney Alfalter was the MVP of the tournament for them.
Yep.
Stepping in for Molly Davis those minutes, and then just what she did. She is the all-everything player. She plays good defense. She can score when needed. She's aggressive. Kate Martin is their second best player, but in that tournament, Sydney Alfalter was their MVP, even above Caitlin Clark, because Caitlin Clark over the course of the entire tournament did not shoot well.
Had the stats to get the the tournament award. And I was gonna save this for a little bit later, but we'll get into it right now. I've been talking about Sydney to you all year, how she does everything well. I'm gonna go as far to say is she's now our second best player, and she's the second best all-around player behind Caitlin Clark. She can bring the ball up the court, she can shoot threes, she can score down low, she hustles for rebounds. She's our second best. I mean, there will be moments where Kate Martin has more points or Hannah Stolke has more points in the game, but our all-around second best player is Sydney Alfalter. This was her breakout moment. You could see it coming if you watched Iowa all year, and it finally happened for her. I was really happy. This is our best starting five, though. Even if Molly Davis comes back healthy, we need to start Caitlin Clark, Kate Martin, Sydney Alfalter, Gabby Marshall, and Hannah Stolke. That's our best starting five. And as much as I love Molly Davis, as much as anyone, Sydney adds in a little bit of height and rebounding that Molly Davis just can't.
Right. Yeah, I was really impressed with her. Watched every game, not all of every game, but obviously watched every minute of the tournament final there. For as bad as Caitlin Clark shot the ball to begin, that step back three where she's fading away, nothing but net. When the time is crucial, and this is the biggest thing, we've talked about this on this podcast. She never disappoints. She disappointed for a half, but she ended up with 34 points. I mean, she had a horrible. You can't say a horrible game, but she had a bad game for her and had 34 points. That's just she never has the 9-point game. She's always going to.
This whole Big Ten tournament, she's been a little bit off, hit and miss. And let's talk about a couple bads. The obvious one is her going 0 for 9 or whatever in the first half from 3. We can't have that in the tournament. She can't go 0 for 6, 0 for 7, 0 for 9, because we're going to dig ourselves in the hole. Maybe not the first round of 64, but after that, it certainly can't happen. Kind of reminds me of when Zach, and I talked about the preview of South Carolina game last year in the Final Four. One of my big points was no bad quarters. Don't lose any quarter by double-digit points. If you're going to get beaten a quarter, 9 points or less, because you can come back from that.
Right.
You start losing quarters by 12 or 15 points, that's going to come back to bite you more often than not, and in a hurry. So Caitlin Clark, I expect her to play a lot better in the tournament, not to go 0 for 9. I don't think we'll see that again. I would assume, knock on wood, that doesn't happen. What really a bigger concern to me is, and I'd like to get some people who know basketball more than I do, is Caitlin Clark's turnovers. She's averaging right around 7. I think she's bringing the ball up the court a little too much. Obviously, on fast break, she has to, because she's the best passer in the land. She makes great passes. We score a lot of points off those fast breaks. But when we're just casually bringing the ball up the court, I'd like to see her bring it up maybe one less time a quarter or 4 or 5 times less a game. Let Kate, Gabby, Sydney, or Molly, when she's helped you, bring it up. Because they're not going to be guarded as hard, first of all. When Caitlin Clark gets across half court now, she's getting guarded hard, and it's causing turnovers. Now, obviously, when you touch the ball the most of anyone on the team, you're going to probably lead the team in turnovers. That just comes with the nature of the business. But I think it would be good for her to get a little bit of a break, let some other girls bring the ball to the court. It'd be a little bit less stressful on her because I think she's getting tired too. With all the media attention, everything that's going on, as tough as other teams are guarding her as they should, I think she's getting worn out a little bit earlier than what she's used to. And I think it would be a nice break for her. I think it was Mark Sanchez or someone that was talking about going into football now about Josh Allen. And he said in football, you want about 10 or 12 plays that are just easy for the quarterback, just a simple handoff, where the quarterback doesn't have to think as much. They can
Right.
just call hike, hand the ball off, and let their mind relax a little bit. I think that's what Caitlin Clark needs a little bit. Let her run up the court, move around, flow into the game because when she's bringing the ball up the court every single time, I think it's just adding a little bit too much stress.
I agree. And each round, every team they play from here on out is a good team. Now, I think, like you said, that opening round, they're going to outclass the team. It's going to be one of the super low majors that they can beat with or without Caitlin Clark. Should not be an issue. But from the round of 32 on, they're going to be in a dogfight. Maybe not the entire game, but there's going to be a point in time where it's high stress. They got to make plays. They got to play good defense. They got to play good offense. Because you got to think last year against Georgia in the second round, it was a good game. They won. And then the year before, they lost to Creighton in Iowa City. So these first two games are in Iowa City. So that's a huge advantage. And they should win those games. I don't see them losing, but there's going to be some stress in that second game. Then obviously in the Sweet 16, Elite Eight, Final Four, championship, 100% stress the entire game. I mean, is there a chance they could go blow them out? Absolutely. But going into the game, you think it's 100% stress, everything. And then just human nature. Her time is coming to an end. At most, she has 6 games left. So internal, external, Hawkeye fans, Hawkeye athletic department, everybody knows this is coming to an end. And as much as we all love to say that everybody's watching all these games because it's women's basketball getting more popular, and it is still because of one person that every record is being set every time she's on TV. I agree there would be more, but they would not set these records if it wasn't for Caitlin Clark. And that is stressful. I don't care if she's 22 years old or whatever, how old, doesn't matter how old she is. She's a young person that has done everything correct and doing everything correct, but it still has to weigh on you a little bit. Probably actually, it has to weigh on you a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. She's human. We,
Right.
we
Yep.
saw it going 0 for 9. She's not a robot. She is a human. And like I said, last time on this, she still needs to bring the ball up the court the majority of the
Yep.
time because she can pop those threes at any moment. I would just like to see some of the other girls bring it up a little bit more often because I don't think they're going to be guarded as heavy. And
Not
like I said, she can free roam a little bit and maybe relieve some of that stress that we're talking about and let her get more into the flow of the game rather than having to be the on court general every single time up and down the court.
the one person I would say not to bring it up the court. I just watched her a little closer this last couple games was Gabby Marshall. She is not a good ball handler. She is a catch and shoot person and play
Yeah.
good defense. Now, Kate Martin and Sydney Falter bring it down, and then if Molly Davis, whenever she comes back, obviously she can be the point guard. And then, I mean, Caitlin Clark doesn't have to bring it up the court in those situations. And then a little bit is this is how Iowa plays. They want the ball in Caitlin Clark's hand because they want to shoot it in the first 5 seconds. And she has to have the ball in her hand to be able to do that because she's going to shoot the 30-footer or she's going to drive and kick it to somebody because she can see and make passes that no one else on the team can do.
Yeah. And she should have the ball in her hands the majority of the time.
Yeah.
Just relieve
Yep.
a little bit of stress out of her.
I agree. But yeah, they're going to, and they have decided to play 90 to 80. That's what their games are going to be. And so you just have to go with that. That's the one thing. Their defense is not good, but they think they can score 90 to 100 points every game, and they can. I mean, they had 95 points the other game, and it was other day, and it was like 6 minutes left to go in the third quarter or fourth quarter. It's like, holy smokes, they score a lot.
They can outshoot anybody in the country. And that, when you talk about tournament, I'm glad you brought this up too. They got to score about 20 points or more per quarter. They got to get to
Oh,
that 80 point. If they get
yep.
held under 80, good chance
Yeah.
they lose. If they get to 85 or above, pretty good chance they win. So
Right.
that's you gotta get up 20 plus a quarter on average.
Yep.
And they're fully capable. But I mean, if Molly Davis comes back, you've got three girls that come off the bench, Molly, uh, Kylie, and McCabe, who can all shoot the three.
McCabe
So
has been dynamite. Like, she doesn't
Mhm.
miss. I didn't
She
realize she
doesn't.
was from Nebraska either. She's from Fremont, Nebraska.
Fremont, Nebraska. I saw that the other day too. I didn't realize that either. So they've got the shooters, and that's how it's going to have to be done. And that, again, going back to Sydney Falter, I think that's the reason she has to start, because she adds a little bit of height and better rebounding. She's got that dog in her, like a lot of young people like to say nowadays. And there's going to be plenty of games, at least one game, if not multiple. We're going to need extra possessions on offense to go outscore the other team. So again, I think our best starting five is with Sydney in there, not Molly.
I agree. One last thing for Iowa. They did get a commitment from number one player out of California, 5-star. I've not seen her play, but I was listening to some people talk today. She's got black hair. She wears it in a ponytail, and she looks a little bit like number 22. And she plays like that. And I would get why that would be intriguing for a girl. It's hard to be the person to replace that, and you're not going to be her. But going to Iowa, and as long as Lisa Bluder's the coach, she knows that if she can show that she can do that, she's going to allow that offense to be run that way. If she's that same type of player, ball dominant, shoot from wherever, good passer, Lisa Bluder will let her do that. So it's a good situation. Um, you know, kind of, I don't know all the ins and outs of how you get someone from California to come to Iowa when you would think Stanford would be all over her, USC, UCLA. But good for Iowa. You have to, you're not going to replace Caitlin Clark because you can't. No one can, but you still got to play basketball next year and the year after that, and the year after that. And you want to use your notoriety right now to get the best players you can to keep the momentum going on a positive side.
Yeah, as we end here on the Iowa side, I'm kind of in a weird way looking forward to next year to seeing how they're doing. Again, with Sydney starting, Kylie will start, probably McCabe and Hannah Stolke will be the main four. I don't know who will round out that last position, whatever it is. But I almost wonder next year, can they fight for maybe a 4 seed in the tournament? Can they be a top 20-ish team and maybe get one of that 4 seed, which still hosts a home, those home playoff games in the early rounds of the tournament. So I'm looking forward actually a little bit to next year. It'll be interesting to see how they do without Caitlin. I think they'll have a chip on their shoulder. The team will,
Yep.
and it'll just be interesting to see how well they do without her. Got some good commits coming in, so the future looks bright. And speaking of the future, I think it's a good time to transition to Iowa State, whose future also looks very bright.
Right. Yep. And now we're going to just transition right into Iowa State. The run comes to an end in the Big 12 tournament last night to Texas. I went to that game. I was in St. Louis watching a golf tournament. Indian Hills Golf was down in St. Louis, so I went down there for a couple days and watched that. And I was driving by, I saw the arrow to go to Kansas City. They didn't play till 8 o'clock. I said, heck with it. I drove about an hour, and I'm like, oh shoot, I already told Trevor we do a podcast tonight, and I didn't have my computer or anything with me. So I called you and said, hey, we're gonna have to postpone it till tonight, which is fine. And it was fun. Got real good seats, $50. It wasn't super busy. If there was not Iowa State fans there, that place would not have been good. Uh, I would say, I don't know how many people were there, but I bet it was 3-1, 4-1 Iowa State to Texas fans. And that's a whole different, the Big Ten and many conferences have always done separate weeks and everything. But the Big 12 over the last 4 or 5 years has always done it at the same time. The women have played at Municipal Auditorium and the men have played the T-Mobile Center. So fans have been able to do both. And this was, there's kind of been a movement to get everything more equal because obviously the Sprint Center, T-Mobile Center is a much better facility, newer facility, bigger. They want everything to be more equal, but in order to do that, they can't play them all the same time. It was actually kind of weird because yesterday during the day there was actually two men's games, and then at 8 o'clock last night was the championship game between Texas and Iowa State. Iowa State with a great game on Monday against the number 1 seed Oklahoma and dominated. Was up 20 to 30 points, really all the second half. Never really was a game. Now we were talking, and I was kind of jumping on my bit here a little bit, and I know you mentioned them, but talking about the 4 teams and 5 teams that could get to that Final Four, I'll tell you what, Texas is good. I was super impressed with Texas. Iowa State has the freshman Audie Crooks from Algona that was, first team All Big 12, not freshman, first team All Big 12. Did not get freshman of the year, and there are a lot of people not happy with that. But that girl from Texas is 6'1", 6'2". She stood by Crooks a couple times, and if Crooks is 6'3", that girl's 6'1", 6'2", and she's a guard. And she could put moves, and she hit shots that she was the best player on the floor, and I think she's an All-American as a freshman. And if she plays like she did last night, they're going to go a long, long ways. And they had 2 girls that were bigger than Audie Crooks, 6'4", 6'5". Their guards, Emily Ryan is this is probably a shade under 6 foot, 5'10", 5'11". They put 2 guards on her that were 6 foot. And Emily Ryan had 9 turnovers last night, and that was the game. They just made life so hard for her. And Iowa State does not really have – they've got another point guard, but it's another freshman. And just made life hard for Iowa State because they're just so much bigger. If you are looking for kind of now they could end up as a number 1 seed depending on how everything works out because they were ranked number 5 in the country, but most likely a 2 seed. But if you're looking for a 2 seed to upset a 1, Texas would be one that I would look at.
Yeah, they've been good all year, and they're a high scoring team too.
Yeah.
They can go toe to toe with just about anybody in the country or anybody for that matter. And like I text you, for Iowa State, tough loss,
Yeah.
but great experience for the long term getting
Yeah.
there because you can't replicate that in practice, getting to the championship game.
They were a 4 seed. They weren't supposed to be there.
Mm-hmm. Great experience for them. They're young. That's a team, again, before that game, a couple days before, I think they were projected to be an 8 seed. I think they might move up to a 7 now. So hopefully Iowa doesn't have to see them in the second round because I did see one bracketology where they do, and I do not want to see Iowa State at all. There's no team that would love to end the Caitlin Clark era more than Iowa State because they're probably tired of hearing about her in Iowa because Iowa State's having a good season in their own right.
Right. And it's just, I don't want to see that either. It'd be horrible just for all involved, except for Iowa State is the type of team that they don't have anybody that can guard Audie Crooks. Hannah Stolke is not that player. They would have to bring in O'Grady just to try to get a little bit of a defense there. And again, I think we said this last time, but with 4 minutes left to go in the game in Ames in December, Iowa State was ahead. Now I think Iowa went on a 10-0 run or something, so it ended up not being super close. But a couple things. Iowa State, 7 or 8 seed, I think is again what you're saying. They beat Baylor twice. They beat Kansas State twice. They beat Oklahoma after losing to them twice in the regular season. So they beat 2/3 seeds a couple times. So you're going to have to put, obviously if you could get to that 7 seed, you're playing a 2. So you're going to play a Kansas State type team. Well, you can beat them. You're going to play a Texas type team, an Oklahoma type team. So it's not the end of the world. The problem is you're going to be on the home court of that team, like a Stanford, USC. Those are the teams you're going to probably see in that second round. And when you're young, and if you start hitting a few shots, and when Audie Crooks gets the ball deep, you cannot stop her. They do a good job of getting her the ball. And to start the game, she missed a few bunnies, and that's why they got down so quickly. She missed 2 or 3 that she usually makes. Then all of a sudden they were down 12, 14, and essentially it was over. And it went from 10 to 25, really the rest of the game. Just Iowa State would hit 2 threes in a row, then Texas would come back. It's just back and forth, but it was never in doubt after that first 8 minutes.
Yeah, you could tell pretty early after, like you said, about probably the first 8 minutes, you knew Texas was probably going to win. And, rightfully so. They're more experienced. They're the better team right now. But again, still really good experience for Iowa State. They're going to be a dangerous team in the tournament. You talk about, you mentioned some 2 seeds. I think last I saw Texas, UCLA, LSU, and Notre Dame, I think would be the 2 seeds. The 3 seeds, you're looking at UConn, I think Virginia Tech, NC State, maybe. Some of those teams would be the 3 seeds, and then we'll see who rounds out the 4s. But Iowa State's going to be a dangerous team in the tournament. They're young. They don't know what they don't know yet, right? That
Right.
type of deal. So I wouldn't be surprised if they get bounced right away. Wouldn't be surprised if they go on a nice run to the Sweet 16 or maybe even the Elite Eight if, like I said, if they don't know what they don't know yet, which can be good.
Yeah. If the thing that they haven't had is the dominant post player. That's been the one thing they haven't had in Bill Finley's career. They finally have that. And so if she can be dominant, and then if some teams aren't quite as big as Texas, where they have to double her or try to get her out of the ball, if those other kids can hit threes, they can win against anybody. But if they run into a team that's big, that's their downfall. If they run into a team that's bigger than them.
Team like Stanford with a bunch of
Right.
trees.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
their nickname too.
Yeah.
So it's no, I'm excited for Iowa State. And Iowa's got a good looking future too. Women's basketball for Iowa State both
Right.
have bright futures.
Yeah,
So
Iowa
that's
State.
exciting.
Yeah, they play 5 freshmen a lot. There was a point in time where there were 5 freshmen on the floor last night against Texas. And it didn't go well, but they're out there getting experience. Kelsey Jones is just another Jones sister that can score. She's more just a 3-point shooter right now, but she's going to get better. Jackson, it comes from an athletic family. Her dad was on the football team when I was there. And then Addie Brown, who's from Kansas, she's 6 foot or so, and she can play all over. She hit 3, drive. And then Audie Crooks is the center piece. If she's on, she's tough to stop. She hits shots. Took a couple shots that I'd like to see her not take, fading away. They leave her open at the top of the key. I know she had hit a couple in the couple previous games, but it just wasn't the right time to take those. But again, she's a freshman. You live with those. She's your best scorer. If she can hit a couple of those threes a game next year, that's just going to make her that much harder to defend.
I know the exact shots you're talking about watching the game. I know exactly what you mean. And, she's young. The whole team's young. But it was a good run for them. And it'd be nice to see them go on a little run in the tournament. And
it's going to be hard just because of their seeding. They're going to play a 2 or a 1 seed in that second round if they can get by the first round. 7, 10, 8, 9, those are coin flip games even in that round.
Absolutely. And I think as we're ending the women's side here,
Yep.
I know we talked about it at the start. Let's talk briefly about the brawl between South Carolina and LSU if you want.
It wasn't a brawl. That's the first thing I'm going to say.
It wasn't a brawl,
everybody
but
keeps talking about that. It was a push, and then a bunch of people got together.
Yeah, it was a push. And I'll just say this right away. I loved it. And I told you last year when Angel Reese did the finger point, I said that's one of the biggest moments in women's sports history. I think this is right up there with it. A lot of people don't like it. I'm not saying it's great, but I commented on Doug DeCock's posts on Facebook, and I was being serious. This is big for the growth of the game. It was on the headlines of ESPN for a day straight. Everyone's talking about it. It's in the headlines. So, yeah, we don't like to see this stuff, but it's growing the game. That can't be denied.
Yeah. Any press is good press. Doesn't matter if it's good or bad press. People are talking about it. And obviously the girl from South Carolina coming in and just jacking that other girl is absolutely wrong. And
I like it. I like it.
right,
I'm old
but
school though. I
just
like
you
that.
can't do. I mean, I understand. I don't
No, I
mind. You
know.
need
I know.
and and I think the bigger talk is the difference in Don Staley and Kim Mulkey talking about it. Don Staley, hey, this isn't part of the game. It's not who we are. But it was them that did it. They really were the ones that were doing it. And then I love Kim Mulkey. I find her hilarious. I find her funny. I don't take her too serious. Wearing that outfit, she looks like Ric Flair. I mean that's the when I saw that video, I'm like, she looks like Ric Flair in his robe coming out to wrestle. She's got the feathers and everything out, and then you know, and that girl is big. She says she's 6'8". I don't know if she is or not. If she is, that's holy smokes. But she shouldn't push that girl. I wish she'd push Angel Reese. That's straight out of WWE wrestling comments, and I love it. Now, it's probably not the right thing to say. You should be a little bit apologetic, and you don't want to see that in the game. But again, that comment by her got people talking. PTI, McAfee, Coward, everybody talks about that comment and the difference between Don Staley and Kim Mulkey and how they are having, conversations with their teams. And the other thing is they were close. And I think the only girl that's suspended for the first game is the tall Cardoza or whatever, however you say her name. She's suspended for that first game, but it was close to being both of those teams only having 5-6 players each in that first round, which probably would be enough to win because they're both going to be a high seed. But, somebody else gets hurt or a foul trouble and you got to run out there with 5 girls. They're just not used to doing that. And if I would be that team that's playing that, I would change my game plan to just play like Iowa and just go up and down fast as you can. Are you going to turn it over some? Absolutely. But hope you can stay in that game till the fourth quarter, and hopefully you've got more energy than they do, and you have a chance.
Yeah, run them out of the building essentially.
That's what I would have tried to do. Now, it didn't happen, so.
That was 20 or 22 minutes. I think that got delayed. There was a lot going on. And when the ref came back and said all this stuff, I'm like, it's too much for me to comprehend right now. It was a lot. But Kim Mulkey, she handled it differently than Don Staley did, like you said. But that's Kim. Kim
Right.
and Angel Reese and LSU, they're the heels of the wrestling side, if you want to, like you mentioned. They're not going to be apologetic about it. I didn't mind the SC player there coming in and pushing her. You mess with one of our teammates, we'll push you right back. I like it. But again, I'm a football guy. I'm old school. I understand you don't want to see that in the game. I get all that stuff, but I think it's great for the growth of the game. You got to have moments like this to controversy and get everybody talking about it, like you said. So I think it's just another big step in the growth of the game. And as we mentioned when we first started here, the TV networks, whoever has it, they want SC and LSU there in the Final Four because you're going to have that drama again, and that'll just bring up all sorts of storylines.
And they're, let alone their teams, they want Don Staley and they want Kim Mulkey. The TV executives want Kim Mulkey as long as they can have her because she's interesting. She's always going to say something or wear something or do something that's going to cause attention to her team, college basketball. That's just who she is. And she played like that. She's coached like that forever. Everybody's like, she's been that way for 20 years, 30 years. She hasn't changed. It's just now that women's college basketball and with social media being so different and everything, you see more of it. But this is the same person she's always been.
She's the women's Bobby Knight in a way.
Right.
She's outspoken, unapologetic. I'm not the biggest fan of her, but I can separate that to she's a character and she's good for the game. I know a lot of folks in Iowa can't stand her, can't stand Angel Reese. If you think long term about the growth of women's sports, especially basketball, they are great for the game. That can't be denied. Even though I'm not a fan of them, they're great for the growth of the game.
Right. I watched that comment by her, I bet 5 times, and I just laughed every time. I just like, you got to be kidding me. And I love it.
It's great. I mean, it's drama at its finest, and that's something that the men's side doesn't really have right now. And I think we'll probably take a quick break here, but we're gonna
Yep.
transition to the men's side, which is mostly going to be Iowa State, rightfully so, because they're the good men's team in the state of Iowa.
Yeah. Well, we got a couple minutes here, and I want
Mhm.
to touch that a little bit. And Murph and Andy had this discussion the other day. Is what are you more excited about, the women's tournament or the men's tournament? And it's hands down the women's tournament because of what we're seeing, because of LSU and South Carolina. You have Juju Watkins, who's on pace to catch Caitlin Clark and pass her. You've got Caitlin Clark, and these players. Men's college basketball has turned into a bunch of 25-year-olds playing basketball because the young kids that are good aren't there. They're not in college basketball. You got to think Omaha Blue is a 5-star best recruit from the state of Iowa almost of all time and can't see the floor because the 3 people ahead of him are 23 and 24 years old. And that's happening all over the country. And you're seeing and they all transfer. Hunter Dickinson's on Michigan and now he's at Kansas, and Zach Edey, all these players, the good players in college basketball right now are probably not going to be NBA players because they're already in the NBA. And freshmen you don't have a Zion Williamson right now. You don't have, you look at the best teams in the country, they're old. I mean, Houston is old. All their players are 4th, 5th year guys. And that's just unfortunately the way it is. And because these players that are staying in college basketball are getting paid lots of money now because these guys are getting paid a lot more money to stay in college than to go be a second rounder in the NBA and not make an NBA team, play in the G League or go overseas. So they're staying 4 or 5 years in college basketball, and they're really good college players, but they're not the best basketball players in the world at their age.
Yeah, the women's game trounces the men's in college right now. I don't even think it's close. And part of it is what you mentioned. A lot of the young players are going to the NBA, the G League, the transfer portal. Unless you really pay attention and are a hardcore basketball fan, college basketball fan, it's kind of tough to keep track of who's on what team, the continuity like we used to have when guys were there 3 or 4 years. You kind of knew them. So, yeah, for all the right reasons, I think the women's side is a better product right now with the drama, the storylines. Will that last forever? Will that last for the next 5 years? I don't know. We'll see. But as of right now, the women's game is just, I think it's a better watch. There's more
Yeah.
drama. It's fun. It's something new. The women's game has been around for a while, but with all these big players coming up, the big names, it's a spark right now, and we'll see if that spark becomes something bigger over the years.
Yeah. The biggest thing in the men's game right now is players stay in college basketball 3, 4 years, but they don't stay in one team for 3 or 4 years. Good, bad, indifferent. You can think whatever you want. They just don't. It's the reality of college basketball in today's age. And women's right now, they're staying for 3, 4 years and they're staying at one place. Not that there are some transfers, but not the number of men's. So, all right, we're going to take a quick break here and we'll come back and talk men's basketball